Rode have just launched their new RODECaster video. They've been kind enough to send this out, so we're going to check it out and see if it is worth you investing in this device. I'm Dale Campbell for DIY Photography, and Rode have been kind enough to send out the RODECaster video for us to try out and give you our opinions on whether it's a worthy device. Now, there are lots of things within the segment of the market that do a broadly similar job. For example, Blackmagic have their ATEM systems, which allow you to combine different video and audio signals together and live stream or record them out. And there are various products from Atmos, for example, that are monitors, but also allow you to combine different video signals together and either record them or live stream them out. There are lots of ways of doing this. So what is it about the RODECaster video that is different? They have done things like this in the past. I think my first impression when I opened it up and had a look was, this is much smaller than the things that they've done in the past, and it feels less complex, on the surface at least. There isn't as much going on in terms of the interface, and actually the aesthetic is far closer to something like a Blackmagic ATEM Mini than it is some of Rode's previous products. Connection-wise, on the back you have 4 HDMI inputs and 2 HDMI outputs. The HDMI outputs are configurable, so you could choose to have them as a program feed of whatever signal is live at that moment, or you can choose to have it as a multi-view feed. So that is configurable within the Rode Central app, and you can also configure it on the device itself. Audio-wise, we have 2 Combi XLR TRS jack inputs. Those allow you to input basically any microphone that's an XLR, which is the majority of microphones, but also allow you to connect up something like an electric guitar, for example. Now, Rode have an audio pedigree, so I'm going to assume at the beginning that these are going to be pretty decent, but I will be testing that out. Along from that, you have audio out for left and right, and then you have 2 headphone jacks. All of those jacks are 1/4 inch variety. They are not 3.5mm. On the left-hand side, you have a plethora of USB-C ports, 6 actually in total. Number 1 is for connection to your computer. Number 2 is for control connection. So that is more focused on being able to connect this to the Rode Control app. Number 3 is there to connect to an external SSD, which will allow you to access the recording functions of this device. Then 4 and 5 connecting USB-C devices such as USB-C microphones and webcams. Moving along, we have the hardwired Ethernet port, which is going to give you the best possible connection to the internet. And then just above that is a micro SD card slot for loading in video and sound. So you could, for example, in there, have a pre-recorded video that you wanted to queue up and play. You can load it in like that. You can also load it in sounds just there. So if you're talking podcasts, that could be your sound effects. The final USB-C port is actually a little bit interesting. Rode have opted to go with USB-C power delivery for the powering of this device. So you have that port and then the on-off switch, and then just underneath it is a little rubberized cable retention clamp, which you kind of fit yourself and it just slots in there. So that means that when you're doing your live stream or you're recording, you won't accidentally yank out that USB-C plug. It's interesting that Rode have gone for the USB-C power delivery solution rather than a standard DC input, and I am all for it. You are far more likely to find a compatible 65-watt USB-C power brick somewhere than you are the specific voltage of DC input with the right barrel connector and all the rest of it. So the more devices that have USB-C power delivery, in my opinion, the better. It also does mean that if you wanted, for any reason, to have a much more mobile setup, you could actually take this out and power it off a suitable USB-C power brick. So I'm finding that a positive addition. The only other thing on the back just there are the 2 antenna connection points that you have as well. On the bottom of the device you have 4 rubberized feet, and the device is fairly hefty and it plants itself on the desk and doesn't slide around, which for this kind of thing is actually important, because when you're connecting things up, when you're using it, you don't want it to be skidding all over your desk. It does become a really frustrating exercise if you're doing something, and it can be quite a pressure thing, live streaming. You don't want your device skidding around all over the place. You don't want it to be pulled every time you move an HDMI connection in or out. Then in the center, there's a sort of VESA-mount style set of connectors, which I assume is going to allow you to mount this in various different ways with the correct adapter plate. Moving on to the top of the device, it is, as I've said, very minimal. We have a set of buttons which will allow you to select whichever camera you have connected, you know, through the HDMI ports 1 to 4, but then also your other sources, which could be your USB-C webcam or the screen of your computer. Above that, we also have buttons for selecting scenes, which we'll get into a little bit later on, and then various controls on the right-hand side for cutting between the different sources, and also some encoders for navigating through the menus and for controlling the various audio outputs to headphones or to speakers. And on the top left, we have a button all by itself, which is to set your recording on your USB-C connection to your SSD. And depending on how you have things configured within the device, that could be recording just the program output of everything mixed down, whatever is live, or it could be recording everything on isolated tracks so that you can actually go back afterwards and cut it in the same way that you would any other multicam video and audio. Now this device has some more tricks up its sleeve in terms of audio inputs. Because Rode is in that market, they've obviously got some other products they're able to integrate into this as a more kind of close-knit ecosystem. So if you have the Rode Wireless Pros, you can connect these transmitters directly to the RODECaster without any extra cables and without actually using the receiver unit at all. So these will actually connect up directly to it wirelessly, which is fantastic, and it just makes everything that little bit more streamlined, which is cool. Looking at the packaging for this, Rode are clearly targeting it towards the video podcast sector. So I thought a good place to start perhaps would be to record a video podcast. So I got in touch with Will at Berwick House, which is a fantastic venue, glorious stately home. I filmed projects there before and I noticed that they are actually starting to do a podcast themselves. So I got in touch and said, hey, how would you like it if I came along, tested this device out, filmed an episode of your podcast with all the trappings that come with Dale coming and filming, nice cameras, lights, all the rest of it. And they jumped at the chance. They said, great, yeah, come along, you can film the next episode. I went along by myself, set everything up, setting up the cameras and the lighting. So for this, we were shooting, I say we, it was just me, shooting on two Canon C70s and a Canon R6. So that was two close cameras and a wide in the glorious library room that they have there. I'd set up a few lights around the place. I wasn't going for full-on cinematic. It was more trying to make it just a nice lit podcast. I dressed the lamps around, tried to make it feel like things were justified in terms of the lighting, but really I just wanted to make it comfortable for them. So that's the setup for the cameras that I had, and I should note actually, Rode were kind enough to send, in addition to the RODECaster video, a set of their coloured HDMI cables. Now I've got HDMI cables of my own, but none of them are as funky looking as these, and I think if you are looking at this and you're kind of new to setting all of this up, or you're going to be working with other people who perhaps aren't super confident with connecting things together, the color-coded cables is really nice and is better than just having color-coded ends as well, because you can really see exactly where they're going from and to, and make sure that you have everything connected where you think you have it connected. And if you are handing off to someone else and there's an issue with channel 1, well, channel 1 is camera 1 just over there. It's on the orange cable. Just check the orange cable, take that one out, switch it out to a different cable. It does make it that little bit quicker and a little bit easier to get things up and running. Aside from the cameras, on the audio front, I decided to test out the Rode Wireless Pro connection. So I had two of the participants wired up with the Rode Wireless Pro system, and then the other participant who was taking the role more of the host. I thought, well, you can justify the host having a slightly different microphone setup. So I gave him my Shure SM7B, which is the kind of archetypal cliche podcast mic. It also has a notoriously low level, so I was running that through my cloud lifter as well, directly then into the back of the RODECaster video and into XLR port 1. Dialing in the levels was a breeze. You know, I was able to connect up my headphones, navigate through all the various menus. I did have the app connected on my MacBook, as well as looking at everything that was on the feedback for the multi-view, because I took along a screen so I could look at everything that was being mixed. It was fairly easy to get everything all hooked up. Like I say, it was just me getting this all set, so I didn't have a crew with me, which meant that I had to set all the lighting myself, set all the cameras myself, and obviously connect up all the audio. And this was the first time that I'd really used it in that way for a podcast, so it did take a little bit of getting used to, but it was absolutely fine. There were only two things that tripped me up a tiny bit. One of them is to do with the connection of the Rode Wireless Pros. I hadn't realized that you would have to add an extra track in order to then select the wireless from the input there. So when you go through the menus, you can just add the extra track. It asks you what you want as the input for that. Select wireless 1 and wireless 2, and then you just bond them up, no problem at all. Now that I know it's really easy to do and it's really easy to change different channels around, it was relatively intuitive and I was able to work it out, so not too bad. But do make sure if you are trying to set something like this up that you are taking the manual out, perhaps with you on your phone, so you can just reference back to it. Additionally, the connection of the SSD actually tripped me up. I'm a Mac boy, what do you want? You know, what am I going to do? That is the way that I am, and those are the hard drives that I have. Everything is formatted to Mac OS journaled, and I don't have things formatted to exFAT. Unfortunately, to connect to this, you must have an exFAT formatted drive, and that did trip me up because I didn't have a spare SSD that I could just format to record this. In the end, what I did was sort of think a little bit laterally. Well, it's a USB-C port. As long as there's something connected to it that's storage, it probably won't be too fussy as long as it's formatted to the correct format. So I actually used a thumb drive, formatted that, plugged it into a little USB-C hub, and it worked. It detected it straight away and I was able to record to it. I'm not sure whether Rode recommend going this route or not, and I imagine you could do it with anything actually. So if you had an SD card or a CFast card or whatever formatted and into a reader into the back of it, you can probably record to it. With my little USB thumb drive, it does have a limited read and write speed. So I think that it didn't like it at all when I tried to do an ISO recording. That was just too much data going out to the drive. Not Rode's fault at all in any way whatsoever. It's just trying to write multiple streams of video and audio, and that thumb drive can't handle it. So instead, I ended up just recording the program output, which was fine. It just worked, no issues at all. And if you are in a pinch, or if you want something a little bit cheaper, you don't want to buy an SSD and you happen to have a little thumb drive, yeah, maybe that can work. Do test it out because everything's going to be different. But yeah, a little hack just there. In terms of actually using it for the podcast, it worked fine. I actually ended up using it in a far more manual way than perhaps it's intended. Coming from Envision mixing in ATEM using kind of background, I sat there and I just cut between the different channels as we went. Worked fine, and to be honest, it felt just like using any other ATEM system in that respect. I have my multi-view up, I was cutting between them. When you cut, you have the option of going for studio mode or instant cut. The difference between the two of them is when you hit a channel in instant cut, so say you're going from channel 1 to channel 2, tap channel 2, it instantaneously cuts to it. In studio mode, you have a preview and you have your program. So you can choose different channels. You could choose channel 3 or channel 4, and that will come up into the preview. And then when you want to go to that one, you press cut. It is a better way of cutting if you have lots of cameras, because you can bring something big up into the preview and cut to that one, and you know what you're going to cut to. You're not accidentally going to jump to a camera that you didn't think you were going to cut to. With everything set camera and audio wise, I got the talent seated and then I basically just let them go at it. It was a really fun podcast. They like to have a couple of drinks and just have a chat about life running a venue and some of the interesting curiosities around the house, because it's a very old house that's been in their family for a very long time, and they have all kinds of artifacts in all the different rooms, and that's kind of what they do. They just look at things that are in the room that they're in and chat about them.
440-year-old skin on a Latin prayer book.
Animal skin.
Animal skin, we hope.
We pray.
We pray.
We pray, absolutely.
And if you're interested, you can watch the whole episode of the podcast. It will be out by the time you see this. Berwick House, I will put a little title up just here of what the podcast is, so you can go and check it out, because hey, that is a real project. It is out in the world, and I did it using the RODECaster video, so it gives you some sense of what can be achieved with this. Having used it for a real project where I actually had to go out and film people other than myself in an environment that isn't my cozy little studio just here where I can, you know, tweak things and set things up just how I want, it was a little bit more real, and it really showed me what the limitations and drawbacks of the system were. And I'm pleased to say that actually there weren't really any limitations or drawbacks in that scenario. And it'd be really good for people like that who have a podcast to get one, because something that they were chatting with me about, they normally use an online system for recording their podcast. They're kind of filming on their phones and then they edit it all together. And it's clunky and it's difficult. The idea, and I was chatting through what the benefits would be of this, the idea that they could connect up some cameras, set this so that it does the auto cutting between whoever's talking, hit record and go, and then at the end of the podcast, that's it. They have the episode in the can and they can put it out, because they are not video editors. They aren't necessarily particularly interested in sitting there and tweaking things and, the minutiae of, we're going to cut here and then we're going to cut here. It would be far better in a lot of ways if they could do the podcast, have a file and put it out, streamline it and make it about the content rather than about the technicalities of the systems that you have to use in order to get your podcast out, because that is ultimately one of the things which prevents people from creating content. The barrier of equipment, the barrier of learning how to edit, it will always catch up with you, especially when you have other things that you're meant to be doing. So if the podcast is not your life and you're not making money from it and you have to go out and work or you have to go out and do other things, then you don't want to be spending all of the time editing the podcast and putting the effort in like that. So that would be a massive plus for them. Now, aside from using it for other people, I thought it'd be interesting to try and do a couple of things that I do with the RODECaster video rather than the way that I do them using, multicam setups and then editing it afterwards. So if you're familiar with my work, Dale Campbell on YouTube, this is a DIY photography video, but if you check me out, I have video breakdowns for cinematography in, say, episodes of Ripley. I'm looking at how they're filming and how they're lighting and what that means and how it works and what the framing does. And I draw on my iPad over the top of the frames and I chat. So I've got two video inputs there, and usually I would just record the two things separately and then mix them together, and that would be that. If I feed those two signals into the RODECaster, well, surely I can do it all, and then at the end of it, I just have an episode and I don't need to edit anything. Now, in that scenario, when I'm doing this, obviously those two sources aren't necessarily going to auto cut, because when I'm drawing on the iPad, I'm still talking over the top of it. This has no real way of knowing when it should be on me drawing on the iPad or when it should be on my face talking. So I would be doing that, and indeed I am doing that manually, so cutting between the two of them as I'm chatting away. I've done this in the past with a Blackmagic 8M and it worked just fine, and it works just fine with the RODECaster video, no issues whatsoever. What I would say when I'm setting this up, it is a far more pleasant experience on the audio side. The video side is kind of neither here nor there, so I could have the 8M or I could have the RODECaster video. I don't think there was a massive difference for that particular application for me, but for the audio, oh my goodness, RODECaster all the way. It has better inputs, it has more flexible inputs, it has that connection with the wireless pros, which I have a set of. So all of those things mean that I'm able to get the audio in a little bit more easily. On the Blackmagic 8Ms that I've used in the past, they had like a 3.5mm jack in, and it wasn't the best in terms of the preamp quality if you're putting mics into it. What I would usually end up doing is feeding sound into my camera with that and then taking that into the desk. Overall, the experience for that particular application was better on the RODECaster video than on the 8M. Now, something that I used to do a lot of, but I don't do so much anymore, is guitar videos. If you go over to YouTube and search on Dale Campbell, I'm not trying to get views for myself, but if you do that, you will see that I used to do a lot of videos way back in the day, like early days of YouTube. I was there making guitar video tutorials, and if I had a device like this, it would have streamlined everything immensely. So I'd tend to have a shot which would show me and the guitar, and then I would have another two cameras. I mean, this is pretty techie stuff for back in the day, early YouTube, like 2007, 2008. I would have a camera set up for my right hand and a camera set up for my left hand, and that would allow me to better explain what I was doing and then cut between whatever I needed to cut between to best articulate that point. But it was all done in post. With the RODECaster video, theory is if I have a shot of me for talking and then a shot of the guitar for playing, if I have everything set up, can I use it to cut between those two sources? And yes, you can, because it's an audio source and because the camera can be associated with an audio source, then you can allocate those and actually use it for that purpose. So here I have a double test set up. One of the elements of the test is, will this key out the green screen that I've got behind me? And the answer is yes, it appears to be. I'm going to turn off the keying. So just remove that. And I should be on a green background now. This is just a television behind me. It's the option I have for testing out whether it can key. So that is working. I'm going to bring the keying back on, and all I've got is just a transparent background there. So all the normal considerations for green screen apply. You know, set your shutter to 90-degree shutter angle, or double the speed that you normally would, because then you won't get the motion blur artifacts and that kind of thing. So it will just give you a cleaner key. I'm doing it in very basic fashion just here, but I do have a little light off to the side to help cut me out somewhat. Now, the other part of it is I've got a guitar in my hand and I want to test out the auto cut feature. What I have found is that it will cut between one channel and the other, and my voice is bonded up to the Rode Wireless Pro that I'm wearing just here, and that is associated with this camera angle. But in order to get it to switch camera angles, you have to be quite intentional with the sound that you're making. If you don't play loud or you don't talk loud, it won't cut to you. And I do have them both set to quite high priority as well, so I would assume that it would want to cut where it can, but you do need to give it a trigger. So, for example, if I strum the guitar quite hard, it'll jump to the guitar side. And then if I talk a little bit louder and trigger it, it will jump to the face just here. So on the guitar, because I'm getting a really clean feed on this from the electric guitar, I should be able to show you how to play a bit of an A major scale. But with the voice, I have to talk a little bit harder in order to get it to trigger and come over to this camera. Now, there's probably something I could do to make this a little bit more responsive, maybe tweaking the audio settings or my position of my mic, but it's definitely something to be aware of. In the past, I've done some work for big gaming companies, done some big campaigns for them, and I go a little bit method when I'm working on this. So a lot of those videos were about Fortnite, and I've kind of just kept playing Fortnite with my son ever since. So I thought, well, this would actually work if you were streaming out to Twitch or whatever you want to do. I'm saying gaming content, it could be gaming content, and because we're able to key the background out, I can have a camera for me, I can have the video signals coming into this, which maybe isn't great for my latency and my reaction times, but you can do it. And then I can mix it all, and I can also have overlays or sound effects as well. So it could be a really cool solution for that. You would be using less of the autocut feature, I think, with that. It would be more just use the keying features so that you could key things out and then drop yourself in, place yourself picture in picture, and then have the game big. But it would work, you could do that. So bringing this all together, we've got a device which allows you to seamlessly mix audio and visual sources together, has some interesting ways of doing that, and it has some interesting options which you don't find on other devices. Is it worth the money? This is definitely more expensive than the competition, and when I was chatting with the people about the podcast, I was expecting them, because they have no context for how much things cost, and video things maybe seem like they should just be expensive, I was expecting them to think that this was a very expensive device which perhaps wouldn't make sense for them. But they didn't think that at all. I know that you can pick up an ATEM cheaper than this, much, much cheaper than this. But with that ATEM, for them, they would still have to actively cut between all of the different channels to actually get a recording at the end that was pre-mixed, so to speak, or they'd have to have someone sitting there cutting for them. So it's a way more active proposition. The value in this is that it takes some of that load and allows you to forget about it to some extent. It has neat connection for audio. It has a very simple interface if you want it to be very simple. And once you've got it set up, if you were just using it again and again for the same podcast, you don't have to change anything. It's there, it's dialed in. So the idea that they could come in, they could sit down, they could do their podcast, they could connect up a flexible array of cameras, because they don't have the C70s that I have. They don't have the nice equipment. But when I mentioned they could just get a couple of USB-C webcams, that piqued their interest. You know, a couple of USB-C webcams, some Rode Pros, and they're away. They've got a very small, very nimble setup, and it will allow them to take some of that editing workflow, get rid of it, and pump the episodes out a little bit more quickly and probably at a higher quality, because the audio will be improved, and that, to be honest, is like the most important thing. And it's where perhaps I think this device really sets itself apart from other things in the market. It has the audio solutions dialed in. And I think for me, in terms of podcasts, that's way more important than the video. People will watch video that isn't the highest quality, but if the audio is not high quality, or if the audio is lagging, then that will really take them out of it. So would I recommend the Rode VideoCaster for your multicam recording, live streaming, podcasting needs? Maybe. It's solid and I enjoyed using it, but it is quite expensive. So that is very much for you to decide whether that value that you're getting out of all of the features is actually worth it, and if you're going to make use of those features. And looking at things in that context, it really is a workflow versus cost question. And only you are going to know whether that makes it worth it for you.